Oh, it is wonderful to be a Christian. Oh, it is wonderful to be God's child. Oh, it is wonderful to have your sins forgiven. Oh, it is wonderful to be redeemed, justified, forever reconciled.
Hello out there in Radio Land. This is Michael. This is the Street Preacher's Corner podcast, the podcast where our motto is, there is always one more thing that needs to be done. Well, the one more thing we're doing today is we're continuing in our coverage of the book of Deuteronomy. I had done this originally for a men's Bible study that we attend here in our community, and I had the notes already, put them all together, and here we are. So just so you understand, we are flying through this. We are not attempting to really dwell on any salient point other than to point things out as we're flying overhead. If you've been with us through the book of Mark or through whatever we were doing before we did the book of Mark, what you'll see is that I'm not afraid to go slow. I'm not afraid to spend an entire segment, an entire broadcast defining a single word. But we're not doing that here in Deuteronomy. We are trying to get through this Deuteronomy overview, and so that you will walk away with a very 30,000 foot view of Deuteronomy. We'll point out some special things along the way. So last time we covered Deuteronomy 1 through 12, and since the way numbers work, number chapter 13 would of course be the next chapter. So Deuteronomy 13 verse 1, the Bible do say, if there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or a wonder. Now let's just stop right there. So it's a prophet. Now, what does a prophet supposed to do? A prophet is supposed to prophesy, right? And a dreamer is supposed to dream dreams. That's sort of, it's right there in the name. But this prophet that is mentioned in Deuteronomy 13, this prophet or this dreamer, they're not doing the thing that they say they're doing. Instead, what they're showing you, they're giving you a sign or a wonder. Verse 2. And the sign of the wonder come to pass, whereof he spake unto thee, saying, let us go after other gods, which thou hast not known, and let us serve them. Thou shalt not hearken to the words of that prophet, or that dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God proveth you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. So the idea is that this guy comes along, he's a prophet or he's a dreamer of dreams, and he doesn't give you a prophecy, like I said. He doesn't give you like Joseph had dreams and those dreams came true. This guy has dreams that don't come true, but he doesn't even give you a dream. He gives you a sign or a wonder, some sort of magic trick, some sort of display of supernatural power, and with the end result of leading you away from the Lord God that saved you and bought you. This is in obviously Old Testament Israel. And so you got to be careful about that stuff. There's a great emphasis in Christianity today, and maybe it always has been, but a lot of the biggest churches that you see are signs and wonders churches. They'll take Mark 16 and they'll run with that, and they'll say, we're supposed to be doing signs and wonders now, and we can talk about that at some other time. But you got to be very careful, because the very fact that a man can do supernatural things doesn't mean he's from God. Jannes and Jambres over there in Book of Exodus could do miracles, and the Antichrist could do miracles. Well, there are two things that either one of those groups, there's two things that the false prophet, that the false sign worker cannot do. They can't deliver you in time of trouble. That's a big thing. They also can't tell you the future. You would think that a prophet, a person who calls himself a prophet, like Muhammad, would be able to tell the future, except Muhammad couldn't. You would think that a prophet, like Joseph Smith, would be able to tell the future, but he couldn't. And these men were silly enough to write down the things that they said were going to happen so we can compare them to actual history. And you want to have some fun with that, you should look into particularly Joseph Smith. There's a lot of documentation on the things he said were going to happen. And for the most part, actually, whenever you talk to a Mormon about this, they will mention to you that Joseph Smith predicted the Civil War, in 1858. Well, no kidding. I could have predicted the Civil War if I'd been alive in 1858. I mean, people were already talking about it. But when he said that, the state of Missouri would be overthrown, and when he said that there were men living on the moon that looked like Quakers, and all that fun stuff. Where am I at here? So this guy, this prophet, this dreamer of dreams, he does his little magic trick, and he does it in the name of Baal and Ashtaroth. And what you're supposed to do, according to the Bible, is you're not supposed to follow him. And like verse 5. Well, verse 4, you shall walk after the Lord your God. So I'm sorry, according to verse 3, the reason God has allowed this false prophet to rise up is to prove to you, or to prove to the congregation, who among them are the ones that want to be deceived. A man is deceived in the Bible because he wants to be deceived. And so you have that going for you. So God allows false prophets in the Old Testament. He allows false prophets in the New Testament to prove men, to show you what's inside you. And that's good. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice, and you shall serve him and cleave unto him. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death. Now, I when I covered this in the men's Bible study, I said, hey, you can look at a bunch of guys that predicted in 2019 that 2020 was going to be the best year we're ever going to have, and it was going to be blessings and new houses and new cars and Cadillacs and prosperity and freedom from addiction and freedom from circumstance, and all those guys. None of those guys saw COVID. None of those guys saw any of that. And then you have all those guys that said Donald Trump was going to win a second term, or he was going to be sworn in into a second consecutive term. They're all wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. And I'm not saying you put those guys to death, but you want to play prophet games, you seem like you'd have to play by prophet rules. Verse 12. I said that at the men's Bible study. So I'm not saying we put Kenneth Copeland to death. Verse 12. Verse 11. And all Israel shall hear and fear, and shall do no more any such wickedness as this is among you. If thou shalt hear say in one of thy cities, that which the Lord thy God hath given thee to dwell there, saying, certain men, the children of Belial, are gone out from among you, and have withdrawn the inhabitants of their cities, saying, let us go and serve other gods which ye have not known. Then thou shalt inquire, and make search, and ask diligently, and behold, if it be truth, and the thing certain, that such abomination is wrought among you, thou shalt surely smite the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, destroying it utterly, and all that is therein, and the cattle thereof, with the edge of the sword. And thou shalt gather all the spoil of it in the midst of the street thereof, and shall burn with fire the city, and all the spoil thereof, every whit for the Lord thy God, and it shall be a heap forever, it shall not be built again. So if you have a city that goes into idolatry, there is an obligation on behalf of the rest of the nation of Israel to attack that city and kill everybody and burn the thing to the ground. Because you were told when you came in Deuteronomy 12, you were told at the beginning of Deuteronomy 12, when you go into this land, you're supposed to kill them and burn them down and don't even mention their names. And so that rule remains in place. Deuteronomy 14, first part of Deuteronomy 14 covers all the dietary laws that you will find in Leviticus 11, and it covers the mechanics of tithing under the Old Testament system. Verse 27 of Deuteronomy 14, and the Levite that is within thy gates, thou shalt not forsake him, for he hath no part nor inheritance with thee. At the end of 3 years thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year, and thou shalt lay it up within thy gates. And the Levite, because he hath no part nor inheritance with thee, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thy hand which thou doest. So that's something you got to do. Every 3 years you make a special contribution to take care of the Levites. And the reason you take care of the Levites is because the Levites, as we've said before, the Levites have no land. They live among you. They don't have their own property. They don't have property that is passed down from father to son to grow crops on or to raise cattle on. They don't have it. So they live off the tithe of the people. So if you're going to institute, New Testament tithing under the same conditions, you're going to have to change the way what the verse actually says, or you can't just say, well, we do it differently now because we don't have crops, we have money. Well, they had money back then too. But what they said was bring food, and if you brought money, you had to bring more than 10%. Anyway, Deuteronomy 15. Let me say this. I've said it before. I think the guideline for New Testament giving is not in the book of Deuteronomy, and certainly not in the book of Malachi. It is found in 2 Corinthians 8. And maybe one of these days we'll cover that. Deuteronomy 15, verse 1, at the end of every 7 years thou shalt make a release, and this is the manner of the release. Every creditor that lendeth aught unto his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or of his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. So what you have is you have a situation there in Old Testament Israel where the debts are forgiven every 7 years. Now, I'm just like you, or probably worse, and if I was living under that situation, I would be very hesitant. Let's okay. So this happens every 7 years, right? We know it's every 7 years from the year that they get to the land of Israel. That's when the clock starts. So if I'm a guy that has some means, God's blessed me, and I got some excess, and I have a neighbor, a brother, a fellow Israelite that needs money, and it's year 4 or year 3 or year 2, I might be pretty hesitant. Or I might be pretty willing to loan it to him because he's got 5 or 6 years to pay me back. But man, if it's year 6 and a half, I have to know in the back of my brain that I'm never going to see this money again, because in a year or 6 months, I have to forgive him this debt and just eat it, right? And so because people are that way, see, God knows you better than you know you. Look at verse 9. Beware that there be not a thought in thy wicked heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of release, is at hand, and thine eye be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him not. And he cry unto the Lord against thee, and it be a sin unto thee. Thou shalt surely give him, and thine heart shall not be grieved when thou givest unto him, because for this thing the Lord thy God shall bless thee in all thy works, and in all thou puttest thy hand to. So God knew that people were going to say, "Oh, it's close to the release year. I can't be loaning money out." No, you loan money out and you just eat it, and God pays you back on the backside of it. That's the whole. But there's a reason God has this situation. There's a reason God has this provision. Look at verse 15. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee. Therefore I command thee this thing this day. All right, Deuteronomy 16, starting in verse 1. Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover in the Lord thy God. For in the month of Abib the Lord thy God brought thee forth out of Egypt by night. Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover to the Lord thy God of the flock and the herd in the place which the Lord shall choose to place his name there. So we know, with the rest of the Bible in place, we know that place that God refers to over and over again is that there's a place where I'm going to put my name at, and that place is where you're going to offer your sacrifices. That place is where you're going to keep the Passover. We know that's Jerusalem, but they don't know that because they haven't gotten there yet. It's a Jebusite city. They're going to conquer it. They're going to rename it Jerusalem, and it means the city of God's peace. But this Passover event starts the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a 7-day feast. And then at verse 9, 7 weeks shalt thou number to thee, begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn. And thou shalt keep the feast of weeks of the Lord thy God with the tribute of a freewill offering of thine hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God, according as the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. So you have Passover, and then Passover starts a 7-day feast called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. 49 days from Passover is Pentecost. It literally means 50 days. It's not a denomination. It's a word that means 50 days. And so Christ is crucified at Passover. We know this from the New Testament. And the Holy Ghost is given 50 days later at Pentecost. Okay? And so all this stuff means something. All this stuff is significant. All this stuff has prophetical impacts. And verse 12 says, and thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in Egypt, and thou shalt observe and do these statutes. So once again, God gives these people these festivals and these holidays, not just so they can have a day off, but so that it points to their past. Passover points to their past. Passover also points to their future. Pentecost points to their past. Pentecost also points to their future. And you see that it said, thou shalt remember thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee. Therefore I command thee, I'm in the wrong verse. Verse 12, and thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in Egypt, and thou shalt observe and do these statutes. So once again, remember where you came from, and that's why we're doing all this. If you get to the end of Deuteronomy 16, verse 16, 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear. This is also in Exodus 23, so it's not the first time they're being told this. 3 times a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose. Once again, Jerusalem. In the feast of unleavened bread, in the feast of weeks, and the feast of tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty. Every man shall give. Where am I at? Yeah, so you're supposed to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year. My notes say 3 times a week. Like, yeah, you might as well live there. And then there's a bunch of stuff that follows. This takes us to Deuteronomy 17. Deuteronomy 17 starts with a bunch of rules about idolatry and the sacrifices in the proper way to offer sacrifices. You're not allowed to offer a animal for sacrifice that isn't spotless and blameless and without blemish. But verse 2 of Deuteronomy 17 starts off, if there be found among you within any of the gates which the Lord thy God giveth thee, man or woman that hath wrought wickedness in the sight of the Lord thy God in transgressing his covenant, and hath gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun or moon or the host of heaven, which I have not commanded, and it be told thee, and thou hast heard of it, and inquired diligently, and behold, it be true, and the thing certain that such abomination is wrought in Israel, then thou shalt bring forth that man or that woman which have committed that wicked thing unto thy gates, even that man or that woman, and shalt stone them with stones till they die. Look at verse 6. At the mouth of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall he that is worthy of death be put to death, but at the mouth of 1 witness he shall not be put to death. So the leadership in Israel has a obligation to look into matters and to investigate reports. I think the phrase that it uses is inquire diligently. And if you find out it's true, then you have to deal with it. It doesn't matter that it's your relative, doesn't matter that it's your friend, doesn't matter that this guy was your mentor in the ministry. You have to deal with it. And the wages of sin is death, but you can't just put a guy to death on the mouth of 1 witness. You can't do it. It says the mouth of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses. Jesus Christ quotes this again in the New Testament where it says, and I'm going to mangle this quote, and I hate it. Says that at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. I think is what it says when he quotes it again. So what you have here is the eyewitnesses. What they have to do is they have to take responsibility for their testimony. Look at this, verse 7. The hands of the witnesses shall be first upon him to put him to death, and afterward the hands of all the people, so thou shalt put the evil away from among you. So there was no situation where you could accuse a man of a crime and then go back to the house. You accuse this man of a crime, and you got to be the first one to throw stones. That's why Jesus said, "Let he that is without sin cast the first stone." So this matter of, you have a lot of situations in our modern society, and I can give you 100 examples, and you could probably give me another 100, where people are accused of things, and it turns out that there's nothing to it, and then it seems like nothing comes of that. Just like whoopsie. I will give you an example. During the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court hearings, there were people that came forward and said that he had done terrible things to them on such and such date, and because Brett Kavanaugh's a weirdo, Brett Kavanaugh has journals from when he was a teenager, and he could prove that he was not at the place that they said he was at the time that he said he did those things. And so he was confirmed as the Supreme Court justice, and nothing happened to any of the people that accused him of things. There were no repercussions for their actions. Well, under the Old Testament system, that's not how that works. There is no anonymous testimony. There is no anonymous sources. There is no witness protection program. We're going to put this guy to death, and you're going to be the one to throw the first stones. Verse 14. When thou art come unto the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, and shalt possess it, and shalt dwell therein, and shalt say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me. They shall anywise set him king over thee, whom the Lord thy God shall choose. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. But he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses. For as much as the Lord hath said unto you, ye shall not henceforth return any more that way. Return no more that way. Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away. For neither shall he be greatly multiplied to himself silver or gold. So let's just stop right there. So this is literally how this thing plays out in 1 Samuel. When the people decide they want a king, they don't pick the king that God wants. They pick the king that they want. God had a king in mind in the form of David, And one day his son, Jesus Christ, a descendant of David, the son of David, the root of David, the branch of Jesse, was going to fulfill the prophecies regarding God being king over them. We've covered all this before, I understand. But, repeating yourself is half what you do in the ministry. So the motivation is an issue. What they wanted was, they wanted a king that would judge them like the other nations. They wanted a king they could lay their eyes on, right? And so God was their king, and what he would do is he would give them a human king, and he would give them a dynasty that starts with David, ends with Jesus. But they got in a hurry, and what they did is they messed everything up, and so they picked a king. And but verse 16 is talking about, he shall not multiply horses to himself. Well, the reason you multiply horses to yourself is you're getting ready to go to war. And God's not opposed to going to war, but God wants you to go to war with God providing the strength for your army. This is the rule, that God would do the fighting for them, that they didn't need to fight like other nations did. God would protect them. And so God says, no, you don't multiply horses to yourself. You don't go into Egypt to get horses, because I brought you out of Egypt. You don't go and rely on the strength of the world to see you through things, because I am your strength. Verse 17, neither shall he multiply wise to himself, that his heart not turn away, neither shall he greatly multiply unto himself silver and gold. And so if you know anything about the life of King Solomon, that is literally what he did. He multiplied wives unto himself, outlandish women that were not of the tribe of Israel, women that were Canaanites and Hittites and Perizzites and Jebusites and all the other ites. As my old pastor Doug Fisher said, he had an Idanite. And so he had all these women, and these women turned his heart. And Solomon ends his days, as far as I can tell, in idolatry and in wickedness. And if he had just read Deuteronomy 17, which I'm sure he did, if he had just heeded Deuteronomy 17, his life would have turned out very different. Verse 18 says, it shall be when he sitteth upon the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write to him a copy of this law in a book out of that which is before the priests, the Levites. So you understand, we talk about scrolls, and maybe scroll and book are more synonymous than my understanding, but you understand that the Jewish society was always a society based on literacy. The idea of an unread, ignorant peasant, you got that from European history, when the Catholic Church took away everybody's Bibles and told everybody they didn't need to read anything. We call it the Dark Ages for a reason. And in the kingdom of Israel, everybody could read. People could read. Reading was a big deal, because God gave you a book. He didn't give you a hologram. He gave you a book. But particularly the king. So what the king is supposed to do is, the king is supposed to write out a copy of the law. He's got a copy that the Levites will provide him with a copy, right? So the Levites will give him a copy of, for example, Deuteronomy. And that king will sit down with his own hand, and he'll write out his own copy of, for example, Deuteronomy. Now, I don't know if you've ever sat down and done this. I write by hand a lot. I write hundreds and hundreds of pages a year of these notes, if nothing else. Every time I do research, I take notes. And every time I do a podcast, there's 5 or 6 pages of handwritten notes in front of me. And so I do a lot of handwriting. And part of that is just the age I am. I'm that generation where handwriting was taught. But I don't know if you've sat down and tried to write out a Bible. It's a ton of work. I did Ephesians, and it weren't no joke. I finished it, but it weren't no joke. I want the experience, of the whole thing. So, but the king is supposed to sit down with a copy that provided to him by the Levites. He's supposed to copy out the and it says verse 19, it shall be with him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to keep all the words of this law and these statutes, to do them. So daily Bible reading will keep you from sin. That was the intention. For verse 20, that his heart be not lifted up above his brethren, and then he turned not aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. Now, Deuteronomy 18, we're going to repeat ourselves a little bit. The Levites have no inheritance. I think it's worth pointing out. And in verse 9, when thou art come in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his daughter or son his daughter to pass through the fire. So that's a reference to the Molech custom of burning the children alive as part of their religious ceremonies, or that uses divination, so no Ouija boards, no horoscopes, or an observer of times, I guess that'd also be a horoscope, or an enchanter, so no wizards, no good witch of the south, no good witch of the north, all that, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, so no talking to dead folks, saved or lost, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination to the Lord, and because of these abominations the Lord thy God does drive them out from before thee. You find out a lot about the Canaanites by what God prohibits the Israelites from doing. Canaanites were laying with animals. The Canaanites were sacrificing their children. The Canaanites were talking to dead folks. The folks were doing had a lot of stuff going on there. And so there you are again. For all do these things are an abomination of the Lord, and because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. Look at verse 15. The Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet, capital P, prophet, from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me, unto him ye shall hearken. So this is Moses speaking, and Moses tells the children of Israel that God is going to raise up a prophet, capital P, prophet, like unto him. So what does that mean? Well, Jesus is going to be a Hebrew, right? And there are a lot of parallels between the life of Jesus Christ and the life of Moses. For example, when Moses was born, they killed all the babies. When Jesus was born, they killed all the babies. Moses went down to Egypt and came out. Jesus went down to Egypt and came back out. There's a lot of parallels, and so Jesus would be a Hebrew, and we go through all that stuff and all that stuff there. Deuteronomy 19. Deuteronomy 19 talks about the cities of refuge, and we're going to start in verse 2. Thou shalt separate 3 cities for thee in the midst of thy land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee to possess. Thou shalt prepare thee a way, and divide the coast of thy land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee to inherit, into 3 parts, that every slayer may flee thither. This is also covered in Exodus 21. So what you have is you take the country, you divide it into 3 parts, and each of these parts, in each of these sections, each of these districts, whatever you want to call them, there's a city that is referred to as a city of refuge. And the idea is that if you kill a man by accident, not on purpose, but on accident, you go to one of these cities. You go to which one everyone's closest, because sure as east follows west, this man's kinfolk are going to be after you, and you need a place to go. And so you go to this city and you talk to the elders of the city, because they're all walled cities, and you say, listen, I need to get inside the city of refuge because I killed a man. And you make your case, and they let you in. And the slayer, the avenger from that family, cannot enter that city to kill you. Now, if you leave, that's on you. You leave, and the man whacks you outside the city walls, and that's on you. And then so you can stay in that city of refuge until the high priest dies, until there's a new high priest, and then you have to leave, and by then presumably everything's settled out. So the reason that's so applicable is that Jesus Christ is our city of refuge, and that's not just a thing we say in silly Southern gospel songs. He really is our city of refuge. And so when you come there with your sin, you come there with your condemnation, you come there with judgment on your heels, and he takes you into himself, and he offers you shelter. And because he is a high priest that never dies, you never have to leave the city of refuge. When the book of Hebrews talks about Jesus Christ being a better covenant based on better promises, that's a better promise. I mean, it's nice to be able to have a place to run to when you accidentally kill a guy, but it's even better to never have to leave. Verse 15, one witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity or for any sin, and any sin that he sinneth, at the mouth of 2 witnesses, or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, shall the matter be established. This is also covered in Numbers 35, I think. And so that's how capital punishment works. Now, verse 19, then shall, let's keep going. If a false witness rise up against any man, this is verse 16. If a false witness rise up against any man to testify against him that which is wrong, then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges, which shall be in those days. And the judges shall make diligent inquisition. I don't know why I have such a hard time with those two words in the same order. Diligent inquisition. And behold, if the witness be a false witness, and hath testified falsely against his brother, then shall you do unto him as he had thought to have done unto his brother. So thou shalt put away the evil away from among you. So it's like remember in the book of Esther when Haman wanted Mordecai hung, and then Mordecai is vindicated, and Haman is hung on the very gallows they had built for Mordecai. It's like that. The thing you do, the punishment for whatever. Let's say you're charge a man with rape. Let's say you charge a man with murder. Let's say you charge a man with thievery, and it turns out that man didn't do it. Then you suffer the penalty. You suffer the consequences of whatever the consequences would have been for him if he'd been found guilty. And that's an interesting way of doing that. So Deuteronomy 20, the Bible says, when thou goest out to battle against thy enemies, and seest horses and chariots and a people more than thou, be not afraid of them, for the Lord thy God is with thee, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be, when you are come down to the battle, that the priest shall approach and speak unto the people, and shall say unto them, Hear, O Israel, ye approach this day unto battle against your enemies. Let not your hearts faint, fear not, and do not tremble, neither be ye terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is he that goeth with you to fight for you against your enemies, to save you. So God will fight for them, and because God is doing the fighting, he doesn't need them. And so you go through verse 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. We're not going to read them, but there's a winnowing process that is laid out in those verses, very similar to what you see with Gideon. So that basically the officer, we'll read it. It's verse 5. And the officer shall speak unto the people, saying, What man is there that hath built a new house and hath not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man dedicate it. What man is he that hath planted a vineyard and hath not yet eaten of it? Let him also go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man eat of it. What man is there that hath betrothed a wife and hath not taken her? Let him go and return to the house, and lest he die in the battle, and another man take her. And see, it's interesting to me because in Gideon's day, these other things are laid out, right? But in Gideon's day, when they go into battle against in the book, with Gideon and all that stuff in the book of Judges, I started saying the book of Gideon, but that's not a book. The first criteria for a man to leave Gideon's army is that he's afraid, and that's a criteria here. Verse 8, the officers shall speak further unto the people, and they shall say, What man is there that is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go and return to his house, lest his brethren's heart faint as well as his heart. The fact is that cowardice is contagious. I mean, so is courage. Andrew Jackson said, one man with courage is a majority. And so if you have courage, in theory, you can impart that to others. If you have cowardice, if you have fear, that'll spread. So the best thing for your army is, if you're afraid, just to send the guy home. Now, that doesn't work in modern warfare, because modern warfare, God is not fighting for you, and you need bullet sponges, you need cannon fodder, you need guys that will make the Germans run out of ammo on D-Day. It's just the nature of the thing. So verse 19. When thou shalt besiege a city a long time, and making war against it, take thou shalt not destroy the trees thereof by forcing an axe against them, for thou mayest eat of them, and thou shalt not cut them down. For the tree of the field is a man's life, to employ them in the siege. Now this is interesting, because this is more like a strategical thing than your usual Deuteronomical Levitical commandment. Only the trees which thou knowest that they be not trees for meat, thou shalt destroy and cut them down. Thou shalt build bulwarks against the city that maketh war with them, until it be subdued. So if you have a tree that produces food, well, you need to feed your army, so you don't cut those down. If you have an oak tree or a pine tree, or God help you, a sweet gum tree, where there's other than the usual benefits of a tree, it doesn't produce any fruit, that you can cut those down and use those in your warfare. Deuteronomy 21. Verse 1, if one be found slain in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee to possess it, lying in the field, and it be not known who hath slain him, then thy elders and thy judges shall come forth, and they shall measure unto the cities which are round about him that is slain. And it shall be that the city which is next unto the slain man, even the elders of that city, shall take a heifer which hath not been wrought with, which hath not drawn the yoke, and the elders of that city shall bring down the heifer into a rough valley, which is neither eared nor sown, and strike off the heifer's neck there in the valley. And the priests of the sons of Levi shall come near, for them the Lord thy God hath chosen to minister unto him, and to bless in the name of the Lord, and by their word shall every controversy and every stroke be tried. Let me just put a pin here. There is no prisons in Israel. There are no prisons in Israel. There were no prisons in Israel. However you want to say it. Everything was either you get a beating and you leave, or you get put to death. Even in the book of Jeremiah, when they want to put Jeremiah in a dungeon, they have to put him into a pit because they don't have there's no prisons built. Anyway, all the elders of that city that are next to the slain man shall wash their hands over the heifer that is beheaded in the valley, and they shall answer and say, Our hands have not shed this blood, neither have our eyes seen it. Be merciful, O Lord, unto the people of Israel, whom thou hast redeemed, and lay not innocent blood unto thy people of Israel's charge, and the blood shall be forgiven them. So why is this? Why are you talking about this, Mike? Well, see, the job of government, according to Romans 13, is to punish evildoers, and God holds them accountable for doing such a thing. So, for example, if you had a country in which people are allowed to run wild and people are allowed to steal as long as they steal under a certain amount, and people are allowed to protest and set fire to things as long as they're protesting for the right reason, according to the people that are in charge, that is a biblical definition of wickedness on behalf of your rulers. So the way this actually pans out here in this chapter is you find this dead body in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of just on the side of the road, in the ditch, whatever. You find this dead body, and you don't know who did it. You know somebody did it. Somebody murdered this fella. Well, you don't know who it is. And so, from God's perspective, those elders in Israel, the guys that he put in charge, the guys he gave power to take life, the power to met out punishments, they have to deal with this. They can't just sweep under the rug and go, oh, well, it's another John Doe case. Something has to happen. Something has to give, because God's sense of justice is way more precise than man's sense of justice, right? There are so many unsolved murders in the world. Really, if I get killed, the cops are going to ask everybody I know. They're going to ask my family. They're going to look into a handful of friends I have, and if none of those guys did it, then they got nothing to go on. It's just that's the nature of the thing. And so they'll go, oh well, and they'll put my name in a file folder and they put it in a little desk drawer thing, and then they'll move on to something else. Well, the children of Israel did not have that as an option in their justice system. You've got to do something about this. If you don't get involved, God's going to get involved, and God will just clean house until he gets the right guy. So what they do is they go to the nearest city, and they get a heifer from that nearest city, from where the dead man is, and they get the elders of that city to wash their hands over the top of this heifer to say, I don't know who killed this man. And then they cut the head off that heifer and let the blood run out in the valley. And so that blood keeps God's judgment off of the nation of Israel. And the elders of that city closest to where the man was slain, they're off the hook. And so this situation begins with a sacrifice and ends with a prayer. Be merciful, O Lord, unto thy people Israel, whom thou hast redeemed, and lay not innocent blood unto thy people of Israel's charge, and the blood shall be forgiven them. So shalt thou put away the guilt of innocent blood from among you, when thou shalt do that which is right in the sight of the Lord. It's quite a thing. It's quite a thing. Somebody's got to pay, or God gets involved. Look at verse 11. Let's go verse 10. When thou goest forth to war against thy enemies, and the Lord thy God hath delivered them into thine hands, and thou hast taken them captive, and seest among the captives a beautiful woman, and hast a desire unto her, that thou wouldst have her to thy wife, then thou shalt bring her home to thine house, and shalt shave her head and pare her nails. I don't know why that is. I have a theory. And my theory is that what you're doing is you're removing her old culture from her. You can tell where somebody's from. I mean, not so much now, but back then you could tell a lot about a person's culture by their especially the woman, the way they wear their hair, the way they all those sort of things. And so it's just like when you send a man off to boot camp, you shave his head, it removes a piece of his identity. So you take this woman into your home and you shave her head and you pare her nails, and you are separating her from her old people. And she shall put off the raiment of her captivity from off her, and shall remain in thy house, and bewail her father and her mother a full month. And after that thou shalt go in unto her and be her husband, and she shall be thy wife. And it shall be, if thou have no delight in her, then thou shalt let her go whither she will, but thou shalt not sell her at all for money. Thou shalt not make merchandise of her, because thou hast humbled her. Man, there's a lot going on right there. Okay, so there were some pretty strict rules that we've covered when we covered Leviticus, and I think we may hit them again on the way out of Deuteronomy, about what you could and could not do if with an Israeli woman, with a Hebrew woman. But these pagan women in these countries that you've conquered, you've killed all the men folk, and you see a woman and she's going to starve to death, and so you take her home, and you remove her from her culture, and you cut her off from her parents. She's not going home to see mom and daddy for Christmas, and that's just how that works out. You are no longer a Hittite; you are one of us now. And if you don't like, if the guy gets with her and he doesn't like her, he just sends her down the road. But he can't make merchandise of her. So that's something, right? That's something. But verse 17. Actually, I'm sorry, verse 16. 15. If a man have two wives, one beloved and another hated, like Jacob, right? And one beloved and another hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated. And if the firstborn son be hers that was hated. Okay, so now remember Jacob in the book of Genesis, right? He had Rachel, he had Leah. He marries Leah first, he marries Rachel second. Leah gets pregnant first. And even though Jacob loved Rachel and didn't love Leah as much, we'll say, I don't know how I'd go as far as say he hated her. Had like 6 kids with her. How much could he possibly hate her? But she forever, in God's eyes, got the preferential treatment of being the first wife and the honor associated with being the first wife and the first one to have a baby. God never slighted her in that. When Jacob dies, he's not buried next to Rachel. He's buried next to Leah. Where am I at? Then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he hath, that he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. Remember what Jacob did? He took Joseph, who was the firstborn of Rachel, the one he loved, and Joseph was his favorite. Now, let's just do that right there in Deuteronomy. Now, obviously, this is after the fact, but if you want to see God's opinion on a thing, how God thinks you ought to proceed and carry yourself in your life, you can look at the law of God and see the mind of God. And in God's world, in God's mind, you can't play favorites. You have to honor the firstborn. You have to honor the first wife, regardless. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn by giving a double. So Jacob's firstborn was Reuben. So what he should have done is given Reuben a double portion. By giving him a double portion of all that he hath, for he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. With Jacob and Esau, this is so strange because Jacob knew a little bit about this thing, right? So he got Esau's birthright, which means the strength of the firstborn was his. If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father, the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him will not hearken unto him, then shall his father and his mother lay hold of him and bring him out unto the elders of the city, to the gate of this place, and they shall say unto the elders of this city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Now, because that's what they're saying, I maintain that all 4 of those conditions have to be met before this can be enacted. But anyway, and all the men of the city shall stone him with stones that he die, so that thou shalt put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. That's something, right? Now look at verse 22, though. This is interesting. This shows up later on in your Bible. And if a man hath committed a sin worthy of death, and he to be put to death, thou shalt hang him on a tree. Don't know if you ever heard of anybody being hung on a tree before in your Bible. His body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but thou shalt anywise bury him that day. For he that is hanged is accursed of God, that thy land be not defiled, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. Now, it is really interesting when you go through the life of Jesus Christ and the death of Jesus Christ, which rules they decided to obey and which rules they decided not to obey. So they had to get Jesus Christ off of that cross before the sun goes down, because that once the sun goes down, that's going to start their Sabbath for Passover, and they got to get him off of there. They can't leave him on the tree all night long, and he's not dead yet, or he is dead by then. But you can't leave any of those guys up there. So they go and they break those other two fellows' legs so that they'll go ahead and die, and they get them all because for some reason they, after having lied about a man and having put him to death for no reason out of the mouth of false witnesses, all of a sudden they're really concerned that he not be on that tree all night long. Well, the reason they don't want him to stay on the tree all night long is you can see that. We care a lot more about the sins people can see than the sins we actually do. In Deuteronomy 22, there are lots of little stuff in there. There's lots of typologies of law and grace, and people fret about. Here, I'll show you. Thou shalt not wear a garment of diverse sorts as of woolen and linen together. Oh my goodness, we can't wear garments of mixed clothing. Well, yeah, if I was an Old Testament Jew trying to stay in the land, yeah, I couldn't wear garments of wool and linen together. But I'm not under that. I was never into that. My ancestors were never into that. My ancestors have no land in the land of Israel. So just calm down. Just calm down. If you want to, be upset about things, if you want, but don't come at me and say, "Aha, you have a polyester shirt on, and therefore you're not right with God." Okay. This is what the Bible talks about how a natural man perceiveth not the spirit things of the Spirit of God, neither can he, for they are spiritually discerned. That is what happens when a man who cannot understand the thing he is reading decides to use this thing that he does not understand as a stick to beat you with. He didn't know what he's doing. Don't know what he's doing. Verse 21. Let's back up. Actually, my notes don't always jive with what I actually have in front of me. If verse 13, if any man take a wife and go in unto her and hate her, and give occasions of speech against her, and bring up an evil name upon her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid. Then shall the father of the damsel and her mother take and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city in the gate. So I don't know if you're familiar with the mechanics of things, but there is evidence. I'm going to be discreet here. There is evidence. There are what the Bible calls tokens of virginity, and it involves blood. I'll let you know it's blood. And so if a man goes in unto his wife and they are together as man and wife, and he later on claims that she was not pure, then her parents can go and get this bloody sheet and say, go to the elders of the city to say, well, if she wasn't pure, then what about this bloody sheet? Where does blood come from? And that man will be found a liar. Says, verse 16, the damsel's father shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter unto this man to wife, and he hateth her, and lo, he hath given occasions of speech against her, saying, I found not thy daughter a maid, and yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity, and they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city. The elders of the city shall take that man and chastise him, and they shall immerse him. I'm sure that I think that's how you say that. They shall immerse him in 100 shekels of silver and give him unto the father of the damsel, because he hath brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife. He may not put her away all his days. So if he's wrong, if he lies about her just because he doesn't want her and he wants a reason to get rid of her, he has to pay the dad, and plus he's stuck with the woman that he hates. If this thing be true, verse 20, and the tokens of virginity be not found for the damsel, then they shall bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her with stones that she die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel to play the whore in her father's house. So thou shalt put away evil from among you. Verse 22, if a man be found, you say, well, that's pretty harsh. Yes, it is. Because sin is no joke. And the fact that you and I live in a society where sin is a joke, and that we've lost all perspective on how terrible it is that a woman plays the whore or that a man commits adultery. We've lost all perspective because we're like a fish in an aquarium. We can't even tell we're wet anymore. And what you need is a Bible to drag you back to things and go, hey, man, this is something God's worth killing people over. Verse 22, if a man be found lying with a woman married to a husband, then both of them shall die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman, so they shall put away evil from Israel. Do you remember that situation in the Gospels where they brought a woman caught in the very act of adultery and wanted Jesus to pass judgment on her? She was caught in the very act of adultery. And so according to verse 22, they got to bring her and the man. Another sermon for another time. Deuteronomy 23. He that is wounded in the stones, and that means exactly what you think it means, or had this privy member cut off, that means exactly what you think it means, shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of the Lord. An Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to their 10th generation shall they not enter in the congregation of the Lord forever. Why? Verse 4, because they met you not with bread and water in the way, when you came forth out of Egypt, because they hired against thee Balaam the son of Beor of Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse thee. That happens in Numbers 22, 23, somewhere up in there. Nevertheless, the Lord thy God would not hearken unto Balaam, but the Lord thy God turned the curse into a blessing unto thee, because the Lord thy God loveth thee. And so because their ancestors did that, they're not allowed to enter the children into the congregation of the Lord. And now, this really was strange about this is Ruth, right? Right. So yeah, I mean, Ruth is literally in the lineage of Jesus Christ, and she's a Moabite, and she's not a Moabite 10 generations down. She's a Moabite 1 generation down. She's a first generation Moabite, or what do you call it? And yet, there you go. Yeah. Verse 5. Actually, no, I read that, didn't I? Verse 12. Thou shalt have a place also without the camp, whither thou shalt go abroad, and thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon. And it shall be when thou wilt ease thyself abroad, thou shalt dig therewith, and shalt turn back and cover that which cometh from thee. For the Lord thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp to deliver thee, and to give up thine enemies before thee. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that he see no unclean thing in thee, and turn away from thee. So you were supposed to, you were going to go relieve yourself, number 1 or number 2. You're supposed to take with you, on the other side of your weapon, you got a little, like a shovel, like an entrenching tool that they used to give us in the military. And so with that entrenching tool, you will dig a little hole, and you will eliminate yourself in that hole, and you cover that up. And the reason you're doing that outside the camp is God doesn't want to see it. And things that are shameful, things that are disgusting, things that are vile are done outside the camp. You run the references in that. Things that aren't holy, things that are against God, they happen outside the camp. So when Jesus Christ is crucified, he's crucified outside the camp. Why? Because he that is cursed, what was the verse in Galatians about everyone that hangeth on a tree is cursed. I'm butchering the verse, but there it is. And you say, oh, Jesus, the crucifixion is this wonderful, beautiful thing. Yeah, for me, it's wonderful and beautiful because of what I got out of it. But the truth is, the cross is terrible. The cross is vile. The cross is guilty men bleeding out to pay for their sins, to pay the punishment for their crimes. It's not you don't crucify people in the middle of town. You crucify them outside the city gates, outside the camp. One of the things that we've lost context on, or understanding on, perspective on, is the seriousness and the terribleness of sin. And there's probably lots of reasons why that is. But I would think that if you lived in a world where once a year you took your scapegoat to the priest, and he confessed your sins over the top of that scapegoat, and then blood was spilled, and that blood was what kept God from punishing you for your sins, you would have some better notion about how terrible your sin really is, and how vile your sin really, and how offensive your sin really is. The fact is that your sin, my sin, was so vile and so terrible and so offensive and so unholy that it took nothing less than the blood of God's own Son was sufficient enough to satisfy the wrath of God against you and against me. Without strength in due time, Christ died for the ungodly. Christ didn't die for good people, because there aren't any good people. You're wicked, I'm wicked. And God in his mercy and God in his kindness extends grace and fellowship to you through the most violent and reprehensible act that's ever happened, the sacrifice of an innocent man. And your sin is not neat and tidy. Your sin's Your sin's gross, your sin's offensive, and so the solution for your sin has to match the nature of your sin. You know, when they make anti-venom from snakes, at least they used to, they make it from snake venom because the cure has to match the disease. See, man, you got all that of a guy taking a shovel with him when he goes out. Yep. That's hey, that's what you come here for, right? So look at verse 19. Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury unto a stranger. Thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend unto usury, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all that thou settest thy hand to do in the land where thou goest to possess it. So you not only do you forgive all debts every 7 years, not only do you do that, but you are not allowed to charge another Hebrew interest when you loan him money. You give him $100, you get $100 back. Now, you can charge Gentiles all day long, and that's the way that works. Deuteronomy 24, verse 1. When a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement and give it to her hand and send her out of his house. When she is departed out of his house, that she may go and be another man's wife. And if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorcement and give it to her hand, and sendeth her out of his house. If the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife after she is defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord. And thou shalt cause the land to sing, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. So let's stop. Let's just point out that there are some sins that apparently defile the very land where it happens. You see this with murder. You see this with this situation. It defiles the land. That land is no longer holy, and since God requires that the land be holy, you got to do something about it. But the reason I'm pointing at Deuteronomy 24 is in Matthew 19, the Pharisees come to Jesus, and they say, can a man put away his wife for any cause? And what they mean by that is, can a man put away his wife just because he's not happy with her? You should burn the meatloaf or whatever. Well, he can't. But what Jesus says, he doesn't tell him, no, you can't. What he says, what did Moses tell you? And they kind of halfway quote Deuteronomy 24, what we just read. He kind of halfway quote it. They say, well, Moses told us we could write a bill of divorcement. Yeah, Moses told you could write a bill of divorcement under very certain conditions. Look at verse 1. She find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her. Now, we know from Matthew 19 that uncleanness is adultery. So if a woman cheats on her husband, under the Old Testament law, he can divorce her. But he can't divorce her just because he wants to. And if he divorces her, if he takes that out, God understands. So Jesus even said this, that, a man's heart could become hard because of that, and God gives that man a way out. Now, God's not that way. God takes Israel back over and over again. God put her through a divorce. God divorced her. God put her away, and then God's going to take her back in the future. But because a man's heart is hard, because men can't handle betrayal, and men will get bitter. Men will be bitter against their wives, and they'll be bitter. All that stuff that goes on in a man's heart. God gave man a way out. Jesus said, because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses wrote this. So Moses, under God's inspiration, Moses wrote that you could write a bill of divorcement. But if you divorce her, she leaves, you can't go back and get her later on. Oh, I changed my mind. No, there's no change in your mind. There's no change in your mind. So verse 17, thou shalt not pervert the judgment of the stranger, nor the fatherless, nor take a widow's raiment to pledge. Now, here's some things you got to think about. This combination, this category of strangers, fatherless, and widows, it comes up a lot. And it's hard for us to get our brains around because we live in a very different world. But in that world, you'll see this. You go through your Old Testament, what you'll see is a widow was always on the point of starvation because a man was paid for what he could physically do. There was no social net. There's some things in the Bible. There's no, they're not mailing checks to people's houses in the Old Testament. So what you have here is you have strangers who they're foreigners from Israel. You have the fatherless, so you have orphans, and you have widows. And these are all people that are going to have a hard time making a living. And God extends mercy to them through the law because they don't have way. And so what you're not supposed to do is you're not supposed to say to this stranger or to the fatherless or to this widow, you're not supposed to you're not supposed to use what little they have left in the world as collateral against them. And the reason you're not supposed to do that is verse 18. But thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in Egypt, and thy Lord thy God redeemed thee thence. Therefore I command thee to do this thing. So you're supposed to remember that you as a people were under the boot heel of Egypt, and you were treated terribly. And because you were treated terribly, you're supposed to know what it's like to be treated terribly, and you're not supposed to treat other people the way other people in the past have treated you. So there's that. Deuteronomy 25. This is where we're going to wind up here for this to go around. Verse 1. If there be a controversy in between men, they come unto judgment, the judges may judge them. Then shall they justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. So once again, Romans 13, your job as a judge, your job as an elder, your job as a law enforcement, so to speak, is to punish bad people and leave good people alone. And it shall be, if the wicked man be worthy to be beaten, that the judge shall cause him to lie down, and to be beaten before his face, according to his fault, by a certain number. 40 stripes he may give him, and not exceed. Lest if he should exceed and beat him above these many stripes, then thy brother should seem vile unto thee. So what you have here is, like I said, there's no prisons in Israel. It's either beatings or death. So you could beat a man, but you can only beat him so much. You can only hit him 40 times. You see several times where Paul was subjected, by the Jews to repeated beatings. And if I remember correctly, they didn't exceed 40 stripes. He says, I think it says 40 stripes save one. So that's Paul. But when it comes to Jesus, they outsourced their beatings to the Romans. The Romans had no such law. The Romans had no such rule. So they beat Jesus until he was unrecognizable. Now there's a moment there in the Gospels where Pilate tells the Pharisees, the elders there that are there at his court, he says, judge him according to your law, which means they could have took Jesus and beat him 40 times and then turned him loose, and it would have been all fine. But they said, no, we don't have a provision in our law when we're under occupation to put a man to death. And so they outsourced their beating to the Roman government. They outsourced his execution to the Roman government. And what men do is men plot and scheme to get around God's rules. Now, verse 5, if brethren dwell together and one of them die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in unto her and take her to him to wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother unto her. That means exactly what you think it means. And it shall be when the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. So the idea is that, that your brother dies, he has a wife. The land is passed along family lines, so she has no one to pass the land unto, right? So she has it gets cut off there. So what happens is you're supposed to go into your brother's wife. You're supposed to get her pregnant, and then that child that is born from that will have the name of the dead husband, so that the name doesn't perish out, and so she has someone to pass that property onto when she dies. Okay. Now there's a way out of this though. And here it is. If a man, verse 7, the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go to the gate of the Israel elders and say, my husband's brother refuseth to raise unto his brother a name in Israel, and he will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him, and he shall stand to it and say, I like not to take her. Then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders and loose his shoe from off his foot and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man that will not build up his brother's house. And his name should be called in Israel, the house of him that hath his shoe loosed. There's a lot going on there, but here's the idea. The idea is that if a man says, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to go under my brother's wife. I'm not going to raise up kids under my brother. I'm not going to do this. Well, then the woman in question goes to the elders and says, hey, he's not fulfilling his duties. And what the elders will come and get him, and they'll spit in his face and they'll take away his shoe. So what he's done, he can't change his mind later on. So where you see this play out is you see this in the book of Ruth, obviously. I've always thought Ruth was a very strange book. And I'll tell you why. If you really want to stick to the letter of the law here in Deuteronomy 25, Boaz should have married Naomi, not Ruth. But anyway, so Boaz wants to marry Ruth. You remember the story. And so Boaz is not the first one in line. Right? So Ruth's husband, who had died, had been a Hebrew, and he was the nephew of Boaz, because Naomi's husband was Boaz's brother. So apparently there's a handful of brothers in that family. So Boaz wants Ruth for himself, but he's not the first one in line. There's a brother ahead of him in line, and I can't remember his name. So Boaz goes to that brother and says, "Do you have any intention on claiming Ruth and the property associated with Ruth?" And the guy says, "No, I don't want nothing to do with it." And Boaz is like, "Give me your shoe." So if this guy ever went back on his word later on, say, "Oh, I never agreed to that," then Ruth would go, "Well, I got your shoe." So that's how that works. Yeah, and so you also see that in the controversy of Onan, when Onan was supposed to go in under his brother's wife, and he started the job but didn't finish it. Let's put it that way. All right, well, we're gonna stop there at Deuteronomy 25. I'm trying not to get too bogged down in this. Probably one more installment here, and then we'll back to our stuff in the book of Mark. I'm also trying to figure out ways to let people know that all this stuff is happening on the podcast. I've got 200 and something broadcasts of varying degrees of quality, and you think that the YouTube algorithm would see that and reward it, but it doesn't. So I'm not looking to be famous or nothing. The material's out there, and if it can be help to people, or if you just want to take my material and steal it and just take the notes and preach them yourself, and that way it gets out there, I don't care. But we're trying to figure out ways to do that. All right, well, thank you for listening, all 5 of you. This has been Michael. This has been the Street Preacher's Corner, and I will see you on the other side.
Oh, it is wonderful to be a Christian. I can't hear you, but it's wonderful to be God's child. Oh, it is wonderful to have your sins forgiven. Oh, it is wonderful to be redeemed, justified, forever reconciled.